Thank you, Dr. Funk. Our second speaker is Richard Daniels. Dr. Daniels received his bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees from Ohio State University. The Ohio State University. He is Associate Professor Emeritus at Oregon State University, where he taught linguistics, creative writing, and medieval English literature for many years, specializing in Geoffrey Chaucer's narrative verse. He is currently pursuing research on materialist German philosophy of the modern period, with particular interest in philosophy of art and ethics. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Daniels.
Thank you. Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to speak up as well. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Last Thursday, well, first let me compliment Ken. Our presentations will have some points of contact or dissonance, perhaps. That was very nicely done, I thought. Last Thursday, the 12th of February, was the 200th birthday of both Abraham Lincoln and Charles Darwin, two great secular men of the 19th century who contributed almost beyond measure to the great Enlightenment cause of human emancipation. It is in this cause, in this tradition, that I would locate myself and the remarks that I have to make this evening. The question before us, I would pose this way: is there any necessary connection between the human faculty of reason and religious faith? Can faith be derived from reason or based on it? Can they be in accord? My answer, fundamentally, is no. I'd like to turn to 3 or 4 quotations from other writers. First, the 20th century poet T.S. Eliot. Humankind, he wrote famously, cannot bear very much reality. Immanuel Kant, the late 18th century German philosopher, found in the first critique, the Critique of Pure Reason, that there are 3 fundamental questions that reason necessarily poses to human beings, but which reason cannot answer: the immortality of the soul, the existence of God, and freedom of the will. Karl Marx, in the mid-19th century, argued, as you all know, that religion is a system of illusions designed to maintain the power of the few, the well-to-do few, over the poor many. But he also wrote, and I'm quoting, that religion is, quote, the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, just as it is the spirit of spiritless conditions. And thus, I think, much of the power of religion in the modern world. A last quotation is from Martin Marty, Lutheran pastor, University of Chicago Distinguished Professor Emeritus, author of 50+ books on religion, a great student of religion, and a rational one. Quote, positive thinkers and public relations officers for the faiths would repudiate the notion that religions cause evils, or they would evade the fact. They want religion to be nothing but Godspell good news. Apologists for the faiths usually minimize the distress that can come with religion or that religion can produce. You will not read about the destructive element in religious impulses in the advertisements for the church of your choice. Yet, if the pursuit of truth is still to be cherished as a foundational theme in the academy, one must note the feature of religion that keeps it on the front page and on prime time: it kills. Close quote. Again, the basic question: can the essential tenets of Christianity be arrived at through the faculty of human reason? Are they in accord with or connected to reason? My answer again is no, they are not. And I'd like to start to answer that question in more detail with some brief notes on a few very important medieval Christian philosophers. And these are all things I've said in similar contexts before, for the most part. First to St. Augustine, who died in 430 CE, 430 of the Common Era. Time and again, he posed this fundamental question: do we understand in order to believe, or do we believe in order to understand? Unsurprisingly, he chose the latter, thus giving primacy to faith, not reason. That is, to that which reason cannot know, to unreason. The Roman Christian philosopher Boethius, who died in 524 CE, distinguished between reason and faith and philosophy and theology, a formal distinction accepted throughout the Christian centuries. Reason goes with philosophy, faith with theology. They do not mix. And thus, even in the mainstream of the ancient Christian tradition, there is not a claim, basically, that reason and faith come together or support one another. Contemporary philosopher John Searle, retired now from Berkeley, working on the problem of free will based on the study of brain mechanisms and neurobiology and recent discoveries, has said in a speech here that the answer Boethius gives in his Consolation of Philosophy, the classical Christian answer to the problem of freedom of the will, is obsolescent and irrelevant today. In the 13th century, the great scholastic Christian thinkers, among them St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure, believed that human beings could reason to certain truths about or of God, that they could reason their way to knowledge of God. And this was the great project of scholastic philosophy, thought by many Christians, even today, to be the high point of Christian thought. They did not succeed in their efforts. An interesting little book, easy to read in this line, is St. Bonaventure's little book, The Mind's Road to God, that I think illustrates my point pretty clearly, a very eloquent little book that I've often taught. In the early 14th century, however, the great English scholastic philosopher William of Ockham argued against this position. He argued that the things of God can only be believed in and not reasoned to, that one can approach God only through faith, not reason, that there is a gap, an unbridgeable gulf between the human faculty of reason and faith. And it is a delusion to think we can bridge it. And this is a scholastic Christian philosopher, a very great one, too. Through human reason, Ockham argued, people can at best know only how their own minds work in relation to the things of the world that they perceive. They cannot know God. And again, we see that in Christianity, faith, not reason, is primary. And this is, strictly speaking, in the first instance, an irrational position. I'd like to move now to the roots of my own thinking on the question of reason and faith. And I have something that I've written on this and been studying these things for many years and have some knowledge of what I'm speaking about. So it isn't just an unconsidered opinion of someone walking down the street, although that has its value too, of course, or its place at any rate. Unconsidered opinions perhaps never really have much value. In the 17th century, Benedict de Spinoza, the great Dutch rationalist philosopher, denied the existence of any transcendent or supernatural power. He thought that the transcendental religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, were the source of most of the world's problems, an opinion with which I agree, actually, adding perhaps Hinduism to the mix, but not Buddhism. The natural universe, Spinoza argued in his excellent book, Ethics, and elsewhere, is all that exists. He called the natural universe itself God, equating God and universe, and argued that humans could know much about this universe, this God or nature, through reason and science, and thus find some degree of freedom and even secular salvation that way. But he denied personal immortality and ultimately free will, as well as the existence of a transcendental divinity. In a line of descent from Spinoza to our own time, we can schematically place such thinkers and scientists as Immanuel Kant, G.W.F. Hegel, Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud, Albert Einstein, and Theodor Adorno, and writers and artists such as Pablo Picasso, Wallace Stevens, Franz Kafka, and James Baldwin. One can say that their work and thought, and those of many others of similar mind, represent the intellectually, personally, and socially liberating modern tradition of materialist Enlightenment thought. The historical materialist worldview that I and many others have arrived at through a lifetime of experience, study, and thought, and some struggle and some suffering to boot to get there, reads something like this. 1. The natural universe of matter and energy and all their permutations in space and time, what the natural sciences, at their best, devote themselves to exploring and knowing, is what exists. There is nothing beyond the natural universe, nothing that transcends it. Life has relatively recently developed within that universe, at least in our tiny corner of it, as have historical human societies since the end of the last ice age, which have their own determining histories and relational patterns. 2, there is no transcendental divinity, no supernatural power. 3, there is no personal immortality. When we die, our self or consciousness, which develops in society by complex mechanisms, simply ceases to exist. It disperses. We return to the universe of matter and energy whence we arose. There is nothing to fear after death. If there is some immortal part, it is universal and not personal or conscious. 4. All human social, economic, political, scientific, and ethical beliefs and systems are produced in human history, which is the relational sum of social and personal human choices and actions and their effects